here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes the loneliest place in the world is inside a relationship where you can't be yourself, where your needs feel too loud, where your dreams feel inconvenient, where your joy makes someone else uncomfortable. But when you live alone, your joy becomes yours fully. Your morning routine isn't up for negotiation. Your boundaries are not up for debate. Your spirit isn't waiting on anyone else's validation to feel alive. This kind of solitude isn't about isolation, it's about integration. Bringing back all the parts of you that you gave away too soon. It's about choosing peace over pressure, clarity over chaos, and freedom over forced connection. We've been taught to fear solitude, to associate it with sadness, with emptiness, with being left behind. But there's a profound difference between being alone and feeling lonely. Solitude is not a void, it's a vessel. It's not the absence of people, it's the presence of yourself. Living alone gives you this sacred space to come home, not just to a place, but to your own spirit. You're not performing, you're not pleasing, you're not interpreting someone else's moods or walking on emotional eggshells. You're just being. And for many people, that's the first time they've ever tasted freedom. And in solitude, your soul has room to breathe. You begin to notice the little things, the sound of rain against your window, the feeling of warm tea in your hands, the comfort of your own laugh when no one else is around to hear it. You discover that your own company isn't a consolation prize. It's a treasure you never fully unwrapped. Loneliness is often what we feel when we're disconnected from ourselves, even if we're surrounded by people. But solitude reconnects us. It gives us access to our intuition, to our inner child, to the parts of ourselves we silenced to fit in or be loved. This kind of alone is powerful. It's the alone where healing happens, where you meet your fears and don't run, where you confront your pain and learn how to hold it with tenderness, where you realize you don't need a crowd to feel worthy. You just need your own presence. And when you can sit in a room with only your heartbeat and feel whole, that's not loneliness. That's liberation. When you live alone, something miraculous happens. You begin to remember yourself. For the first time in maybe years, you're not adjusting your tone to avoid tension. You're not making yourself smaller so someone else feels bigger. You're not dimming your light to keep someone from feeling uncomfortable. You don't have to second guess your outfit, your music choice, your breakfast routine. You just are free, honest, unedited. In many relationships, even loving ones, there can be subtle and sometimes not so subtle pressures to modify who you are. Maybe your passion is too much. Maybe your dreams feel inconvenient to them. Maybe your sensitivity is labeled as weakness, or your independence mistaken for distance. So slowly over time, you adapt. You shave off pieces of yourself to fit. You trade authenticity for acceptance. But living alone doesn't ask that of you. In your own space, there is no negotiation about who you're allowed to be. You don't need permission to cry when a song touches your heart. You don't have to explain why you rearranged your furniture at 2 a.m. because your spirit needed change. You can laugh loudly, dance badly, wear pajamas all day, or speak to yourself out loud without the weight of being observed or judged. You get to build a life around your energy instead of bending your energy to fit someone else's life. And this isn't just about comfort, it's about identity. When you stop filtering yourself to fit into another person's expectations, you start reconnecting with parts of you that were never broken, just buried. Your voice returns. Your opinions sharpen, your emotions become valid again, not too much, not overreacting, just true. You begin to love the you that doesn't compromise, the version of you that takes up space unapologetically, the version that no longer seeks to be enough for someone else, but is finally enough for yourself. And when you're finally allowed to be fully yourself, not in moments, not in fragments, but every day, in every room, that's not just freedom, that's home. And one of the most profound gifts of living alone is this: it teaches you to trust yourself, not in theory, but in practice. When you're not relying on someone else to be your safety net, you begin to realize how capable you really are. You become the one who fixes the leaking tap, pays the bills, chooses the paint color, sets the boundaries, and makes the hard decisions. And with every task you accomplish, your inner dialogue shifts from, can I really do this, to, I've got me. Living alone puts you in direct contact with your instincts. There's no one there to override them or talk you out of them. You begin to notice how your body responds to people, to choices, to environments. You begin to trust those gut feelings, the quiet whispers that say, this feels right, or this isn't for me. That self-trust isn't built overnight. It's forged through small, consistent acts of courage, cooking a meal just for you, handling a power outage on your own, navigating a panic attack without reaching for someone to fix it. And in those moments, you discover that the one person you were waiting to rescue you was you. The beauty of this trust is that it doesn't come from control or certainty. It comes from witnessing yourself handle what you once thought you couldn't. It comes from falling apart in solitude and realizing you didn't disappear, you rebuilt. And now when fear shows up, it doesn't run the show, you do. You learn to make decisions without a committee, to validate your emotions without a second opinion, to celebrate your wins even if no one else is clapping. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that your worth doesn't need to be constantly affirmed by another presence. Your worth just is. And once you've built that kind of relationship with yourself, one where you are your own anchor, your own advocate, your own safe space, everything changes. The world doesn't feel as scary. Love doesn't feel as desperate. And loneliness loses its power over you because you're not just living alone. You're living with someone you trust deeply, you. When you live alone, there's a silence that many people try to avoid, but if you allow it, that silence becomes one of your greatest teachers. For the first time, you're not surrounded by someone else's moods, projections, or emotional energy. You're not navigating tension you didn't create. You're not decoding someone else's silence or trying to figure out if they're angry or just tired. You're not absorbing their pain and forgetting to feel your own. You're not constantly in emotional reaction mode. Instead, you begin to hear yourself clearly, and you notice what truly makes you anxious, not just what triggers conflict in a relationship. You discover what peace actually feels like, not the absence of arguments, but the deep stillness that comes when your nervous system isn't bracing for a shift in someone else's tone. You begin to see the patterns in your thinking, the feelings behind your behaviors, the stories you've been telling yourself about who you need to be loved. Living alone gives you emotional space to observe, not just respond. And in that space, you start to ask better questions. Why did I feel so tense this morning? What am I actually craving? Connection or validation? Is this sadness mine, or is it something I carried from someone else? What do I need right now, truly? You're no longer performing emotional caretaking for someone else. You're not rushing to fix the discomfort. You're finally sitting with it, learning from it, and in doing so, you build emotional intelligence that is rooted in truth, not codependency. Clarity doesn't mean you stop feeling difficult emotions. It means you begin to understand them. You name them with honesty instead of shame. You tend to them instead of pushing them down. You stop outsourcing your emotional needs and start tending to your own heart with compassion, presence, and care. And here's the most beautiful part. Once you've experienced that level of emotional clarity, it becomes very difficult to settle for anything that confuses it again. You no longer mistake chaos for passion. You no longer confuse anxiety with chemistry. You no longer chase people who can't meet you emotionally. Because now you know what your emotional baseline feels like when it's not being constantly disrupted. You've met yourself in your calmest, rawest, and most honest state. And that clarity becomes a compass. It becomes the standard by which you measure everything else. When you live alone, one of the most life-altering realizations you experience is this: your peace is yours, fully, wholly, and finally. It's not something you negotiate. It's not something you protect from daily friction. It's not something you beg for in a space that's supposed to be safe but never really feels that way. Your peace is not on someone else's mood swing schedule. It doesn't shatter when a door slams, a tone shifts, or someone withdraws affection without explanation. Your peace becomes sacred not because life is always quiet, but because you are finally in control of the emotional atmosphere you exist in. When you share space with others, especially in romantic relationships, peace often becomes conditional. You may find yourself adjusting your behavior, your words, even your energy, just to maintain surface level harmony. Sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it. You just tighten when they walk in the room. You overthink, you placate, you minimize your needs. But when you live alone, those micro adjustments stop. Suddenly, the silence isn't heavy, it's healing. Your mornings begin gently, not anxiously. Your evenings are filled with rituals you create for yourself, not emotional labor for someone else. There is no unexpected tension to manage, no criticism where you hoped for care, no one invading your peace under the guise of just being honest. Your home becomes a place of emotional safety. And emotional safety isn't a luxury, it's a foundation. You light candles because you want to, not to set the mood for someone else. You play music you love, eat when you're hungry, and speak to yourself kindly because no one is around to make you feel like those things are silly or indulgent. You're not afraid of being too much or not enough. You are simply you, at peace. And peace is not boring, it is revolutionary. Because in that stillness, you begin to heal wounds you didn't even know were open. You begin to regulate your nervous system without bracing for impact. You begin to trust joy, not as something fleeting, but as something you're allowed to live in. And once you taste this kind of peace, you become fiercely protective of it. You stop opening your door to chaos disguised as love. You stop entertaining people who disrupt your calm and call it passion. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You realize that true connection, whether with a partner, a friend, or yourself, should feel like a deep exhale, not a constant holding of breath. Because when no one controls your peace, you finally get to own your life. And that kind of freedom, it's not just beautiful, it's unshakable. When you live alone, truly, fully, something profound begins to form beneath the surface of your life, a foundation. Not built from fear or dependency, not from loneliness or lack, but from wholeness. And this wholeness becomes the most powerful groundwork for any future love you may choose. Because that's the key. You choose, not chase. You no longer look for someone to rescue you, complete you, or soothe the wound that still bleeds. You've already met the person who stays you. You've already practiced showing up on the hard days, loving yourself through the ugly cries and the silent victories no one else sees. You've learned to hold space for your own complexity, your fire, your fear, your tenderness, without judgment, So when love does arrive, it's not your oxygen, it's not your escape, it's not your entire identity. It's an addition, not a lifeline. Living alone teaches you the difference between loneliness and longing. It teaches you to wait for a love that doesn't drain your peace or silence your voice. You become fluent in emotional safety, so you stop mistaking chaos for connection. You learn how to set boundaries without guilt. You understand that your needs aren't too much, they're sacred. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop needing someone to make you whole, you become more available for a love that's actually healthy, one that's not rooted in possession or performance, but in mutual respect, one where both people are free and choose each other, not out of fear, but out of fullness. Because the version of you that emerges from solitude knows her worth, knows his value, knows they deserve a love that adds to the life they've already built, not one that asks them to abandon it. You'll no longer trade your inner peace for outer validation. You'll no longer settle for half presence or inconsistent affection. You'll no longer pour yourself into people who only offer you a thimble in return. Well, humor, because you've learned how to love without losing yourself. And that's the kind of love that changes everything. So if love comes, let it come. But if it doesn't, you'll still be standing, rooted, radiant, whole, because your first great love wasn't someone else. It was the quiet, powerful, healing relationship you built with yourself. Living alone isn't about rejecting love, it's about redefining it. It's about choosing to come home to yourself first, to unlearn the belief that your value is tied to being chosen, needed, or partnered. It's about creating a space where your peace isn't a luxury, but a daily standard, where your voice isn't silenced, but heard clearly by the one person who always needed to hear it most, you. Living alone teaches you how to stay through discomfort, through boredom, through joy. It strips away distractions and reveals your truest needs, your softest edges, and your deepest truths. It's not easy, but it's sacred. And once you've built a life where your joy doesn't rely on someone else's presence, where your days are full of your own rituals, your own values, your own rhythm, where your self-worth is intact, whether someone texts back or not.